Link TV, connecting you to the world. Link TV is viewer supported. Watch more at linktv.org.
Link TV presents Mosaic World News from the Middle East. Here are today's top stories.
Netanyahu mulls settlement building policy. Iraq reevaluates security plans after bombings. And religious groups rally in support of mosque near Ground Zero. Mosaic World News from the Middle East begins now. Benjamin Netanyahu headed a ministerial meeting in which he presented alternatives to what he described as a freeze on settlement activities.
In the meantime, Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman lowered expectations of the direct negotiations with the Palestinians. As for Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, he emphasized that the Palestinians are going to engage in the negotiations, even if the odds of reaching an agreement are 1 in 100.
The atmosphere and statements issued ahead of the launch of direct negotiations between the Palestinians and the Israelis in this report by Ilyas Karam from Jerusalem.
1 month before the end of the deadline to free settlement activities in the West Bank, the Israeli Prime Minister is looking for solutions to avoid falling into a deadly political trap. On one hand, Netanyahu wants to avoid angering the Americans and having them accuse him of causing the failure of direct negotiations with the Palestinians. On the other, he is being vigilant about maintaining his right-wing coalition. While Netanyahu upholds his unclear position, on the surface lies a proposal that would adopt a quiet settlement freeze policy. In it, settlement construction would resume in the major blocks, which Israel considers part of its territory, in the permanent solution. But they will refrain from construction in remote and isolated settlements while not officially announcing this policy.
Netanyahu does not have any prejudice and does not take any drastic steps. The right is ready to help him rely on the Palestinian rejection. His 7 mini cabinet ministers don't think that anything will come out of these negotiations. For that reason, they're getting dragged to the summit only to please Obama.
So there is someone to rely on to cause the Palestinian failure of the negotiations, as Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman excludes the feasibility of the Washington summit success. As for the Palestinian side, President Mahmoud Abbas confirmed that he is going to attend the summit to seek peace, even if the hope in reaching it does not exceed 1%.
We are committed to peace. As long as we are committed to peace, we will attain it. Even if we only have a 1% chance, we will seek this peace, and that is why we are going, based on a conviction that we want to reach peace with our neighbors.
However, settlements alone are not what could disrupt the direct negotiations. Netanyahu will head to Washington, carrying preconditions which demand that the Palestinians recognize that Israel is a state for the Jewish people, and that the Jordan Valley is under Israeli security control, in addition to Israel's refusal to withdraw from the occupied eastern part of Jerusalem. The summit will remain without any clear reference points or a timetable. As a result, Netanyahu is trying to have it both ways. He does not want to be perceived as the cause for the failure of the negotiations with the Palestinians. However, at the same time, he seems eager to maintain the safety and stability of his governing right-wing coalition. Ilyas Karam, Al Jazeera, West Jerusalem.
Joining us from Jerusalem is our Al Jazeera bureau chief, Walid Al-Omari.
Walid, first we'd like to know what transpired from the Israeli side regarding Netanyahu's so-called alternatives to settlement freeze.
The most notable alternative is what is proposed by Minister Dan Meridor, who calls for unannounced resumptions of what they refer to as limited settlement activities in and around major settlement blocks. The plan takes effect after the settlement freeze deadline expires, so the idea is to keep the construction of settlements quiet. The past 10 months witnessed an official freeze of settlement activities. Netanyahu, who met with a 7-minister cabinet while vacationing in northern Israel, wanted to formulate a certain position on the settlement issue, but he was still unclear. The ministers emerged out of the meeting not knowing what exactly Netanyahu wants. Does he want to extend the settlement freeze, which he announced 9 months ago, as it expires next month? Or does he want to resume the settlement activities, which will likely blow up the entire negotiation process?
Early this morning, confrontations erupted between Palestinian youth and Israeli occupation forces in the occupied East Jerusalem neighborhood of Silwan.
Eyewitnesses said that the confrontations erupted after armed settlers forcibly entered the yard of a mosque, which stirred the residents. The Israeli forces used tear gas and rubber bullets to disperse the youth, who hurled stones and Molotov cocktails at them. The neighborhood has been tense since the Israeli authorities' decision to demolish 22 houses under the pretext that they did not have a permit.
Defense Minister Ehud Barak said Israel is under no illusions about having to make serious concessions when direct peace talks begin next week. But Barak told visiting Quartet envoy Tony Blair the Palestinians must also be willing to compromise. Blair stressed that final status issues must be included in the negotiations.
We fully understand the sincerity of the moment and the need to take courageous decisions on both sides in order to make sure that it will fly and we will reach an agreement. And Israel, I can tell you, is ready for this and ready to take the decisions which are needed.
There will be no successful negotiation unless all the final status issues are on the table. I'm not going to try to negotiate solutions here and now. That is for later. We can think creatively and constructively. Indeed, we must do so. But proposals on these issues will be a litmus test of seriousness.
Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman said he cannot see Israel and the Palestinians reaching an agreement within a year because differences are just too great. On the central issue of settlements, the foreign minister said there was no reason why buildings should not restart in the major settlement blocks in Judea and Samaria when the 10-month construction moratorium expires on September 26th. Palestinian negotiators have repeatedly threatened to walk out of the talks when and if the freeze ends. Lieberman said that natural growth should be understood in Washington, and they know that Israel intends to retain major settlement blocks in an eventual peace deal. The leader of the Hamas terrorist organization predicted that negotiations between the Israelis and the Palestinians will be catastrophic. Speaking in Syria, Khaled Mashal said the first victim of the talks will be the so-called Palestinian refugees' right of return. Mashal singled out Jordan as a victim because it hosts the most refugees, and according to him, the Israeli and American intention is to make Jordan an alternative homeland for the Palestinians. The Hamas boss claims the talks will serve Israel by improving its image, and he called for a Palestinian strategy that is based on resistance.
In Ramallah, a number of Palestinian factions operating under the umbrella of the Liberation Organization and independent factions held a national conference in which they declared their rejection of the Palestinian Authority's participation in direct negotiations with the Israeli occupation. The conference was held even though Palestinian security authorities tried to forcefully prevent it from convening and assaulted its participants.
The Palestinian factions were not successful in holding their conference here. After getting assaulted by Palestinian security forces, it had to move to this safe location. The National Conference, which convened to reject the direct talks, became a press conference to condemn that aggression.
The goal was to prevent us from persevering, to prevent the popular movement from persevering, and to prevent the popular movement from upholding the opposition to the ongoing negotiations, because these negotiations are based on Israeli and American conditions.
The security authorities refuted the accusation and claimed that the matter was merely an internal dispute between the organizers of the conference. They added that they interfered when the dispute became public.
We did not know that a conference was being held. We had no information, and we weren't even present. We were there because we were notified of a problem at the front door of the hall and on the public street. So we came on the basis that there was a developing problem.
As for the direct negotiations, the frequency of the popular response against these negotiations keeps on steadily increasing, especially since they are not based on the clear conditions that were demanded by the Palestinian Authority, which could mean that these talks could be transformed into negotiations to serve the Israeli vision and American interests, in addition to targeting the Palestinian people to accomplish these visions and interests without even granting them their basic rights.
We will continue our call and our efforts to stop the direct negotiations. These negotiations don't have any points of reference and place Palestinian rights and the Palestinian cause in a dark tunnel.
Among the attendants here, there is a conviction that what is yet to come is far more dangerous than what has already passed. In this phase, prior to engaging in direct negotiations, it might seem that the Palestinian Authority needs to represent its internal front. As for the opposition that was assaulted in the heart of the city of Ramallah, it was supposed to form the main support for the authority in the face of Netanyahu's blackmail.
A series of bombings rocked various parts of Iraq, placing the spotlight once again on the security situation in the country. More than 60 people were killed in a string of coordinated attacks targeting Iraqi security forces. The bombings come nearly 1 week before the end of U.S. combat operations in Iraq.
This scene may be familiar in Iraq, but it carries with it tragic news for dozens of Iraqi families. One of the unchanged questions is, who could be behind the bombings? Knowledgeable sources familiar with Iraqi security affairs said that there has been a growing trend of attacks claimed by Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Between 2003 and 2007, Al-Qaeda has increasingly intensified its campaign, notably in Anbar province in western Iraq and Diyala province east of Baghdad. However, by 2007, the situation changed due to the emergence of the so-called Saqqa, or awakening councils. At the time, Saqqa forces were formed to fill in the political vacuum caused by the shortcomings of foreign and government-backed forces. Fierce confrontations erupted between Saqqa forces and armed Al-Qaeda fighters in Diyala province. On the ground, Al-Qaeda was surrounded from 3 directions, by Saqqa fighters, the Iraqi army and US forces. In 2007, Al-Qaeda started to lose momentum, with its attacks declining, especially in the years that followed. Nearly 2 months ago, top US military commander in Iraq, General Ray Odierno, said that his forces killed 34 Al-Qaeda leaders, severing the group from its senior leadership and throwing it off balance. However, Al-Qaeda's recent activities show that the group is still trying to prove its presence on the Iraqi political front. Meanwhile, many Saqqa fighters voiced their frustration with the government. Members of the Saqqa forces, such as 22-year-old Yusuf, have not received their salaries for nearly 2 months. In addition, many members of the Saqqa forces were not allowed to join the Iraqi army. This is raising concern among key players on the political scene.
What we don't want them to do is rejoin Al-Qaeda and return to armed operations. This is very dangerous. Many are becoming vulnerable. They must receive the support of the Iraqi government. The Iraqi leadership must understand our concern.
Iraq must evaluate the security situation as the US moves closer to end its combat operations in the country, in addition to resolving the government formation crisis. All these factors, if not evaluated, will help bring Al-Qaeda back to the front line, after notably losing momentum over the past 2 years. Adel Mahjoub, BBC.
The atmosphere during the holy months of Ramadan is often full of love, mercy, and kinship.
In the Iraqi province of Dikar, the tribal gatherings during iftar, known as Madayif, bring back some of the most profound and cherished traditions and practices of Iraqi society.
للجنوب العراقي صفة مميزة تختلف عن باقي الأماكن العراقية الأخرى.
Iraq's southern region has a distinctive feature that separates it from other parts of the country. The south is home to many tribal communal houses, known as Madef. Each tribe has its own communal house, whether it's made of Beit Ashar tent or bamboo. The Madef is used for meetings and gatherings by members of the community. During the holy month of Ramadan, tribe members and their guests sit side by side to eat iftar. Following iftar, they converse and tell stories, lasting until very late at night, while sipping tea and coffee, which are part of southern hospitality.
التي لا تفارق مضايف الجنوب.
احنا في رمضان هذا عادة.
We usually get together at night during Ramadan. We sit and converse together. Our conversation usually revolves around various current affairs, including tribal, social, political, cultural, and educational issues. The Madiyaf opens every day until midnight. It's open for the entire community. We invite all of our brothers to attend these gatherings, which are open until the end of the holy month of Ramadan.
كانت بعض العشائر تختزن حالة الفرح إلى رمضان.
Some of the tribes plan their happy occasions to coincide with Ramadan, especially weddings and festivities. People reach out and reconcile their differences during Ramadan. During the holy month, people visit one another. Some compete in poetry contests during the holy month. A poet once said, "A modest person is a person with good moral character, whose mind outweighs his body."
The traditions and customs here in the south are genuine, with each tribe seeking to uphold the values and holiness of this month in its own way. They all gather here at the table of brotherhood, overcoming their differences and setting aside their tribal problems. The Madayaf will close their doors at the end of Ramadan, which marks the beginning of the blessed Eid al-Fitr holiday. On the eve of Eid al-Fitr, people in the south spend their time reciting poetry and performing prayers.
Problems that arise during the month of Ramadan are usually peacefully resolved in a brotherly manner. People are more forgiving and tolerant during the holy month of Ramadan.
Madayaf are gates to knowledge, science, and literature, and their teachings are not far from the traditions and customs observed during Ramadan. They've become a social center valid at any time or place.
It could be one of the most serious war crime cases to emerge from the Afghan war. 5 US soldiers have been charged with deliberately targeting Afghan civilians. The troopers allegedly killed 3 Afghans in Kandahar province this year. They were charged with murder in June. Now, since then, US Army prosecutors have also filed additional charges of conspiracy to commit murder and drug use against them. The plot reportedly began when one of the soldiers formed what's been called a kill team to randomly execute Afghan civilians while on patrol. Investigators say anyone who dared to report the events was threatened with violence. All 5 are awaiting court-martial and could face life or death, or let me correct myself, life in prison or death if convicted. The Afghan president says there has been no progress in the 9-year war in his country. Meanwhile, Hamid Karzai says the war in Afghanistan will not be won unless militant havens are eliminated. He called on the US to shift its military focus to what he called terror hideouts outside of Afghanistan. Speaking to the head of US Central Command, James Mattis, in Kabul, Karzai said civilian casualties are another reason for the lack of progress. He also told Mattis that there is a vital need to strengthen Afghan security forces. Well, a new report has revealed that an Afghan presidential aide, now under investigation for corruption, has been on the CIA's payroll for years.
The New York Times says Mohammad Zia Salehi, the chief of administration for Afghanistan's National Security Council, has been paid by the U.S. spy agency for years. It's unclear exactly what Salehi has done in exchange for the money. Salehi was arrested in July over corruption charges. This comes against the backdrop of Afghan President Hamid Karzai's comments a few days ago, when he accused the U.S. and its allies for the endemic corruption in his country. Now there are rising doubts about how serious the US is in its so-called fight against corruption in Afghanistan. Some believe the revelation underscores deep contradictions at the heart of Obama's administration's Afghan strategy. But others say the US is indeed fueling the rampant corruption in Afghanistan.
The corruption is endemic, and it is a product of the occupation itself, that the United States war effort is dependent upon those who will support it inside of Afghanistan, and to obtain that support, they have dispensed great amounts of cash.
It's been nearly a decade since the US invaded the country. The war has left tens of thousands of Afghans as well as thousands of foreign soldiers dead, and the violence has affected millions of Afghans. Security is at its worst, and corruption and poverty is rife in the post-invasion Afghanistan. The US-led war is meanwhile increasingly getting more unpopular. Polls show that most people both in Afghanistan and the country's contributing forces to the war are against it. And there is still no clear answer to this question. What is the United States seeking in Afghanistan?
Today, the Pakistani authorities evacuated nearly 500,000 people in the Sindh Valley. 1 month after these destructive floods began, 3 cities in the southern part of Pakistan are threatened with additional flooding. An American government official said that the Pakistani Taliban movement is planning on carrying out attacks on aid workers.
There are growing concerns of a humanitarian catastrophe in southern Pakistan's Sindh Valley as a result of the floods and the continuing monsoon rainfall. For this reason, Pakistani authorities are asking nearly 400,000 people to evacuate 3 additional cities that are threatened by the floods.
I have 6 children. We have been here for 3 days. My children and I ran away from the floods. We are hungry and no one is helping us. My children are going to die of hunger.
As the Pakistani government attempts alternate solutions to rescue the flood-afflicted people, Washington has warned of Pakistani Taliban attacks on relief workers. According to Washington, these attacks could also target Pakistani officials. This information is based on American intelligence. Pakistan is facing the worst humanitarian crisis in its history after the floods submerged 1/5 of the country and caused the death of thousands. The United Nations estimated the number of flood victims at more than 17 million people. 8 million victims need urgent aid. Hadiye Rube, Al-Arabiya.
جماعات مسلمة يهودية ومسيحية وبعض الجماعات المدنية هم
A coalition of Muslim, Jewish, Christian, and civil groups held a rally today to show support for the construction of an Islamic center, including the Cordoba Mosque near the World Trade Center in New York City. The new support comes amidst the strong debate and opposition voiced by various right-wing groups in the U.S. Some families of the September 11th victims took part in the rally. Sagher Salam reports.
Several U.S. right-wing groups voiced fierce opposition against the construction of an Islamic cultural center and mosque in New York City. Opponents of the mosque argue that it's insensitive to the nearly 3,000 victims killed in the September 11, 2001 attacks. However, not all Americans share the same position on the issue. Groups backing the mosque have formed a new coalition dubbed New York Neighbors for American Values. The coalition includes more than 40 religious and civil associations, including some Muslim, Christian, and Jewish groups. The coalition said it will fight to preserve civil rights guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution.
My own family came here to escape religious persecution. That's what America is all about. We must open our arms and borders, and we should never tell Americans, regardless of their origin, that they can't practice their religious freedom here.
But we unequivocally reject
We unequivocally reject the political posturing, fear-mongering, and the crude stereotyping that seek to demonize the project, whose goal is to build bridges between faiths and provide a cultural and recreational center for people of all faiths.
The project, whose promoters wanted it to serve as a bridge to civilized and religious dialogue for people of all faiths, shows the deep division inflicted on the U.S. entity by the September 11th attacks and the decline of religious tolerance.
The views expressed on Mosaic are from contributing broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible from support of viewers like you. Thank you. Watch Mosaic World News online. Stay up to date with breaking news. Read our blog. Get transcripts of past shows and more at linktv.org/mosaic.
This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs, programs which connect you to the world.